The whole point of the sermon this morning is this one line. This one line is really all I'm trying to say. And it's this: it's in a broken world, love is the only thing that can create shalom. In a broken world, love is the only thing that can create shalom. So if you haven't been with us for the past few weeks, it's totally fine. What we've been trying to prove is that God is on a mission to restore the world. Like, he cares. He looks out at the world and he's like, this is a mess. Humans have really done some bad work here, and we want to fix it. We want to heal it. We want to restore it. We want to renew it. We want to recreate it. And that the word for that is shalom. And God is on a mission to restore the world to the perfect state of being that he has always intended, despite human interaction. It's that ultimate peace that every human heart longs for. So we've been calling this series in Minnesota As It Is in Heaven. I know I'm jumping around, Tammy. You just have to follow me. It's all right. In Minnesota As It Is in Heaven. And what we took that from the Lord's Prayer. That Jesus taught his followers to pray, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And before we get to the whole earth, we kind of want to start in our little square footage, our little neighborhood, our communities, our cities, and let's just go to the whole state. In Minnesota, we want God's kingdom to come here. It's a prayer that I've been praying that Woodbury would be part of the inauguration of God's advancing kingdom in the world, but that we'd start here. I think that would be a good thing. In fact, just to really drive the point home, we made these cool Minnesota-shaped stickers. I don't know how good your eyesight is. These are a little small from back here. Oh, thanks for the applause, Presley. I really appreciate that. Anyway, these Minnesota-shaped stickers, and we have them, and they're the shape of Minnesota, and it just says that line, in Minnesota, as it is in heaven, because we want to keep that at the forefront of our mind, that God is doing a work. He's doing a work at your office. Isn't that wild to think about? He's thinking about you and your office, and your classroom, and your neighbors. And he wants you to play a part in this work of shalom. In 1992, there was a gentleman by the name of Rodney King. He was pulled from his car following a police chase. He was beaten by the police. It was filmed. The officers were charged and then acquitted. And the acquittal, they were wrongly acquitted. Is that the right way to say that? They were guilty, but yet let go. And the acquittal sparked rage, and it turned into riots, and the riots lasted days, and 63 people were killed. Now, this picture right here is Rodney King himself. It's 1991, so you can kind of get the vibe. But he asked, Rodney King, the victim, by the way, asked if he could address the public. And so he had some prepared notes that some professionals had helped him put together so that he could speak and have some sort of influence on what was happening in L.A. And he decided at the last moment to just go from his heart. And what he ended up saying, you can just watch this. There's plenty of video on it. But he got on TV, cameras were rolling. He's on the verge of tears. And he said a famous line that a lot of people remember. But he said, can we all get along? Some people misremember it as, can't we all just get along? But his heart statement was, can we all just get along? We've got enough. And he says this is interesting. We've got enough smog, because he lives in L.A., and fires. Can we stop making it horrible for people? It's just not right. He says, we're all stuck here for a while. Let's try to work it out. And maybe in an inarticulate, halting way, what he's calling for in Los Angeles, he's calling for shalom. He's saying, I don't want just human interactions to get along, but we've got enough other sorts of problems. The world, the neighbor, LA needs to be recreated. The kingdom needs to come here. Now, he's not necessarily using Christian terms. He may not even be thinking Christian thoughts. But what he articulates is what every human heart longs for, and it's this Hebrew word, shalom. So this is the series so far. God is on a mission to create shalom in the world. We play a role in God's mission, and that makes us missionaries. And that's a hard turn for a lot of people to make, because when you think of missionaries, you think of the Gill family who presented during Bible class this morning and the work that they're doing in Pakistan. And you think, well, I'm not going to pack my bags and move to another country where it's incredibly dangerous to present as a Christian and try to evangelize. I'm not doing that. And so I've always thought this was clever, and nobody else but me thinks it's clever. There are some people who are missionaries because they go, and there are some people who aren't because they stay, and we think of ourselves as stationaries. I just think that's so funny, but nobody else has ever, it's always just polite laughter like that every time I say it. But anyway, yeah, flat affect, right, Corinne? Yeah, that's exactly what Corinne's expression is exactly what most of you are thinking. Anyway, a lot of us think, well, I just stay. I don't have a role to play in God's shalom, God's kingdom advancing the world, and that's just absolutely not true. And we've abdicated that responsibility that we have in the world to do that in our communities in which God has placed us. In our families, in our neighborhoods, in our offices, in our classrooms, God has put you there for a purpose, to introduce his kingdom, to bring shalom. And it's not always like we think. Being a missionary in God's kingdom is not always like we think. But I think there's a bigger problem, a bigger hang-up for a lot of us is it's this question: how, in such a broken and messed up world, does shalom, does God's kingdom, does God's work actually happen? The world it's kind of a disaster. It's kind of a dumpster fire, it feels like. I know I talk to a lot of ministry buddies, ministry experts, and they're just like, man, we're at another election year and things don't look like they're getting any better. It's like we didn't learn any lessons 8 years ago or 4 years ago, and we're just heading for a car wreck once again. And the church needs to be the exception to that. Shame on us if we play a part in that sort of division. Because it means that we're advancing something that is not God's kingdom on the earth. We are not playing a part in God's shalom. We're playing a part in something else. And I know many of you have put your hopes and dreams on a certain political outcome or a certain political candidate. But there is no one, there is no human, there is no political platform that can fulfill your dreams. There's no one who can change the world except for Jesus. We have to believe that, church. We have to live that. We have to shine that light. And as we enter into a divisive political season, may our light shine even brighter. May we live the love, the peace, the goodness, the beauty, the shalom of God in this time. But the world does feel broken. I saw, this has been a while back, but there was this guy on one of the highways around here, and he had a load of styrofoam, I don't know, 4x8s, but they were styrofoam sheets of something, maybe insulation or something, and they had come loose from his pickup, and they had broken apart, and they had scattered all over the highway. I mean, millions of pieces of styrofoam all over the road. And I remember, I probably should have stopped and helped, but I remember driving by, and this poor guy was out there picking them up one by one. And I was just thinking, like, boss, I don't think you're gonna clean it up, man. I think it is too big of a mess. It's too big of a problem. And I think that's how we feel about the world. It just feels broken beyond repair. And it's tempting, and this is what so many Christians have done, including us. It's tempting to say, the world is so messed up, I'm just going to hide away in my holy bunker and then wait for Jesus to return and take me, rather than engaging with the world and reintroducing God's goodness in the world. There's an instinct among Christians. And I want to tell you, that's a temptation from Satan. To hide away, to hole away, to do your own thing, just to save yourself from the world and just let it burn. That's not what we're called to do. We're called to be a presence of God's goodness and God's shalom in the world. Boy, that was enough sermon for the morning, right? Don't you think we should just sing a song? Yeah. I got more. I want you to turn in your Bibles, if you would, to Matthew chapter 22, verse 34. This is a story. You're super familiar with it, most of you. But even if you're not, we need this reminder constantly. But Matthew chapter 22 and verse 34, it's a story of Jesus being tested about what the greatest Hebrew command is, the greatest command in the Torah. What is the most important thing? And one of them, an expert in the law, like he knows, right? Verse 35, he says, tested him with this question. Verse 36, teacher, what is the greatest command? Now, it's not an honest question, right? We know that. It's fun. It's kind of a suspicious question to ask, actually. I mean, imagine you asked a police officer, hey, excuse me, officer, what laws do I really need to keep? It'd be like all of them, right? Mom, Dad, what household rules do I really need to not break? And your parents would be like, what are you talking about? All of them. HR, what company policies are really important that won't get me fired? What? All of them. Keep all of them. It's a suspicious question, but it's because Hebrew rabbis, Hebrew teachers, including Jesus as a rabbi, had thought and thought and thought, and they had distilled the essence of the law down to these specific ideas. And this is what Jesus answers. He says, he quotes Deuteronomy 4 and Leviticus 19, and he says it's love. It's loving God and loving neighbor. These are quotes from the Torah. Now, why love, though? That's weird, right? Well, love, it sounds kind of hippie. Isn't that a Beatles song? Why love? That just sounds like pop culture stuff. Why love? Shouldn't it be courage is the most important command? Boldness, that's the important command. Or what about faith? I mean, that seems pretty important. Paul even contrasted faith and hope and love, and he said, but remember, the greatest, that's love. Or what about holiness? I grew up in churches where holiness was the thing, and how you lived and how you behaved, and that was the most important command. And love could take a walk. Grace, we don't really need to talk about that, but holiness, and Jesus reiterated again and again. All three, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, reiterated the same command. And of course, John is full of this idea. But of course, it's a litmus test, right? It's a purity test. He's not asking what's the answer. He's saying, do you have the right answer? It's a little bit like asking somebody if they want pineapple on their pizza. It's a trick question. That's an abomination. You don't want pineapple on your pizza. What we have learned about you is a little bit about your character if you say yes, because in Italy, where pizza was perfected, some people think it was China, but where pizza was perfected, pineapples are not indigenous. They were not intended to be on pizza. So if you put them on your pizza, well, you could just go take a walk somewhere. I don't really have strong feelings. I don't really mind pineapple on my pizza. But these are things that divide a room sometimes. If you say certain vocabulary, if you speak of certain candidates, it divides a room. Oh, you're in that group. You're in that category. Notice what Jesus said. This is what I really want to draw your attention to in this particular passage, in these stories. And it shows up in Matthew, in Mark, and Luke. It's what Jesus says as he wraps up his answer. He says, really interesting. Matthew, he says, all the law and prophets. So everything you read in the first 2/3 of your scripture, hang on these ideas. They're not unimportant. You can't just ignore them because this is a summation of it, but it hangs on these ideas. So if you were to read the entire Torah and the prophets, this is eventually what would bubble up to the surface. In Mark, Jesus saw that in Mark, Jesus turned the question around. Every story is just a little different, has a little bit different color. In Mark chapter 12, verse 34, he talked to the expert in the law and he said, hey, that's a good answer. You're not too far from the kingdom with that answer. You're not too far from shalom. In Luke chapter 10, verse 28, he says, you've answered correctly. Do this. Love God, love neighbor, and you will live. You will live. That's the life that you want. In a broken world, love is the only way to create shalom. In a broken world, love is the only way to create shalom. Because in a broken world, love is the only way to respond out of character to the way you've been treated. In Luke chapter 6, where Jesus is also talking about love, it's called the Sermon on the Plain, not the Sermon on the Mount, but it's similar content. Luke chapter 6, he says, do good to those who hate you. The only way you can do that is if you have love that's producing that, because otherwise you're just going to respond in kind. He says, bless those who curse you, pray for those who mistreat you, turn the other cheek, lend your coat and your shirt, don't demand them back. Preemptively do for someone what you would wish they would do for you. Love is the only way that the victim of a brutal police beating, Rodney King, can get up in front of microphones and tell everybody to stop being so angry on his behalf. Can we all just get along? Love is the only way to absorb hate and to return good. It's the only way to do that. It's the only way. And families are good practice fields for this. When you're particularly frustrated or annoyed with a family member, but you've absorbed, like, okay, I'm not going to bring it up. I'm not going to let it be an issue. And you return goodness. That's only love can do that. And Jesus is saying, take that feature and expand it everywhere. Take it everywhere. Love is the only way to absorb mistreatment and return blessing. Love is the only way to take a slap and then turn the other cheek. Listen, in a broken world, that not only encourages, but let me say demands retribution, demands it. People get upset if you show love when another party deserves retribution. When it demands retribution, love is an act. It's a rebellious act of redemption. It's redemptive. It's resisting the status quo. Love does that. Love does that. Here's the deal, though. You've heard this before, but we need a sturdy grip on the idea of love. English is a squishy language. The definitions of our words, they're tough because they can be used for a lot of things. In English, the word love is like duct tape. It can be used for anything, right? You can use it to repair a tree or a tire. I mean, you could just use it. I think for some dads, I suppose, their life motto is if you can't fix it with duct tape, you're not using enough, right? And so in English, you can love mac and cheese and you can love your husband, sometimes in that order. You can love these things, but they're completely different categories. That's not true in Greek or Hebrew either. They have more firm. In fact, in Greek, there's 4 words that we translate into this one word, love. I want you to see something that Jesus says back in Luke chapter 6. This is the summation of Jesus' teaching. Jesus says, if you love those who love you, golf clap. Sarcastic golf clap. That's what he's essentially saying. He says, what credit is that to you? Even sinners, even those sinners, you know who I'm talking about, love those who love them. And if you do good to those who are good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do that. Come on. And if you lend to those from whom you expect repayment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners expecting to be repaid in full. It doesn't do you any good. Now, this is interesting. I was reading this, and I'm like, credit is kind of a weird concept. Why does Jesus use the word credit? Like, what are we building here? What is Jesus talking about here? So you look up the word. The word credit is literally translated almost every other place in the New Testament. It's translated grace. What unmerited favor is that to you if you do something with strings attached? It doesn't do you any good. It's no favor. It's no grace. Even sinners can do that. Parents, have you ever taken your little kids when they're involved in, whatever, basketball, soccer, little football, and they do one of the practices, they'll ask the parents to participate, and it'll be like parents versus kids. You know what I'm talking about? And you ever see, there's a couple dads who sometimes take it a little too seriously, and they're just out there on the soccer field dominating these second graders. They're just reliving the glory days. I saw this video a while back, and I took some screenshots of it, but it was this Pee Wee football league. So these are, 9, 10, 11-year-old football players, and they had asked their moms to tackle them. So the boys had the football. They were trying to get past mom, and moms are tackling them. And I don't know if they edited it out, but these moms were destroying these 9-year-olds. And I can just imagine the moms are like, you're not calling me bro anymore, I brought you into this world. I can take you out. It was so funny. One mom clotheslined the kid, decleated him. It was this one over here. I think it might be this one over here. She's pile driving him. That's like illegal. You cannot do that in football. She picks him up and she's like, boom. It was so funny to watch. It was a great, very, very humorous video. Being able to pile drive a 9-year-old is like loving people who are only going to love you back. Being able to tackle a little kid or block some second grader shot in basketball as a grown adult is like loving, expecting repayment. Good job. Very nice. All right. Don't get too excited about that. That's what Jesus is saying. And it's nothing to brag about. He's asking, how are you at loving people who insult you? How are you at loving people who are ungrateful? How are you at loving people who weird you out? How are you at loving creepy people? Love that expects has zero redemptive power. It's not really love, is what Jesus is saying. Love that demands some sort of reaction has no redemptive power. In fact, love that expects, we have an English word for that. That's called manipulation. That's the English word that we have for that. I will display love if you do this thing for me. That's manipulation. And you can go talk to your therapist and they'll be like, that's not good for a healthy relationship. New Testament scholar, a guy named Scott McKnight, has written a lot of good books. But he had an adjective that I really liked. I guess it's an adverb. But he talked about shalom, creating love, or I guess I'm adding that. But he talked about love as a rugged commitment to their good. And I thought that was good. I like that word rugged. It's durable. It's going to keep going despite the obstacles. It's going to push through despite the push back. I love that idea. Rugged love is not looking for the escape hatch. I don't know if this is a Patrick thing, a guy thing, or a human thing. But when I'm in like a public place like a restaurant, I'm uncomfortable sitting with my back to the entrance. You know what I'm talking about? Is anybody else? Okay, so it's a Patrick thing. All right, well, you're going to get to see into my mind. When I'm in like a public restaurant, okay, a few of you, I see a couple hands. It's weird for me if my back is to the threat, like I'm under threat, like I'm some sort of mob boss. I just don't like having people just being able to walk up behind me. I like to be able to sit and survey the room. And it really is like a goofy, like, what am I going to do if some bad guy comes in? I'm not going to do anything, throw my spoon at him, nothing. But I'm just like, it just makes me feel more comfortable to be able to survey the danger coming in. And I've always been like this. I noticed this when I worked at a company where we repaired garage doors, and these were industrial doors. They were really tall sometimes, and you'd have to get up on these 20, 30-foot ladders. I don't have a problem with heights, but I'd be up on these ladders, and I'd think, if this ladder goes, what's my plan here? And I'd be like, well, I'll leap to that rafter, and I'll shimmy over to that pole, and I'll slide down, and I'll be fine. None of that was going to happen if the ladder went down. I was going down with it and then going to the hospital. It wasn't going to happen, but it was like my mind wanted to be prepared. Where's the way out of this situation? Obviously, never going to do that. A friend of mine actually is a ref for high school and college basketball. And it's so fascinating to talk to him. I've watched lots of basketball games with him, and he's watching a totally different game. I'm like, ref, are you blind? And he's like, actually, the ref was white. Watch the replay. And he's right. It's different. But he said every time before they go into even high school, and at this point, come on, it's not even high school. It's like middle school and elementary school where parents are losing their minds. Come on, relax. But anytime they go into a game, they talk with the three refs before about what's our exit plan when things go sideways. And he talk all the time. They have to use their exit plan because some parent is so mad that, they call the foul. It's ridiculous stuff. They have to use their exit plan. We often begin the project of love with our eye on the escape hatch. I will love you, but I'm always aware of the way out here. I want you to do something for me, a little bit of a mental project. I want you to envision a hard-to-love person. Now, maybe it's somebody you know, but maybe it's an abstract person. Maybe it's the person that the news has been warning you to be afraid of, or it's the person that your podcast you listen to tells you is bad news. And I want you to envision that person. This person, let me describe them for you. They hold every single wrong opinion. They don't have not a single right opinion, right? Every wrong opinion. They spout all the ridiculous talking points. I mean, you just eye rolls around them. The stuff that they think is wrong with the world, you're like, but that's the stuff I'm committed to being right. The stuff that is on their prayer list for God to change is on your prayer list for God to keep. They were in despair over that Supreme Court ruling, and you were celebrating. They were acting like that new law was the end of the world, and you were happy. Or vice versa, right? They're arrogantly confused. They're confidently wrong. They don't have an open mind like you do. They're the literal embodiment of everything you disagree with and stand against. The world expects you, encourages you to treat that person with contempt. They expect you to treat that person. They're constantly feeding you reminders of why you do not need to regard that person as someone made in the image of God, worthy of human dignity and value and kind interactions. Look at what Jesus says in the next verse in Luke chapter 6. It's funny because if you're in your physical paper Bible, there might be a heading, and it sounds like Jesus is turning into a new topic, but I don't think he is. I think he's still talking about love. And he says in verse 6, verse 37, he says, do not judge. Do not judge. Pfft, that idiot. He has no idea what he's talking about. And you will not be judged. Do not condemn. Man, they're exactly what is wrong with our country. This is why the state is like this. And you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. When you treat that person, whether they're an abstract concept or they're the person sitting next to you, when you treat that person with contempt, you're proving that Christianity is no different than anything else in the world. It has no power to transform the human heart. That's what you're proving to the world. Christians are just like everybody else. When you love that person well, when you have a rugged commitment to their good, you are living proof. You are living, walking proof that God is good and he's on a project to redeem the world. When you love well. Well, actually, I think this is the best way to say this. Love is good apologetics. Love is a good defense of the Christian faith. So let me conclude by saying this. I want to offer, let's get practical, right? Let's get real practical. I want to offer a 3-phase plan to be a missionary of God's shalom in the world. 3-phase plan. You ready? If you got your notes on your phone, this is a good time to take notes. If you you should take notes. It's good. Phase one. I know, shocking, right? Phase 1 is love. Love. All right? Yeah, that's basic. It's the greatest command. Phase 1. All right, Patrick, but what if that doesn't work out? What if they're arrogant and entitled? Well, that's when you move to phase 2. You ready? Phase 2. Keep loving them. Oh, well, yeah, I know, trick question, right? I gotcha. But this isn't easy to do. What if that you're kind and then they're mean in return? What if they take your act of shalom and they stomp all over it? What if your kindness, you get called some label or something? What if you get insulted? Well, all right. If that happens, then and only then can you move to phase 3 of the plan. You ready? Here's phase 3. Love them some more. There's no end to this. And some of you are like, well, okay, Patrick, how far? Where's the escape hatch? And I would just encourage you, I would say your exit route, your escape hatch can be the same as that of Jesus Christ. You follow your love for them all the way to the ultimate sacrifice. Aren't you grateful that Jesus didn't stop short in loving you while we were still sinners? Christ died for us. My mom told me years ago about a project she was working on. I think this was before they had even moved here. And there was a lady in her congregation that was just going through it. I mean, self-induced pain, right? Making terrible choices, but just going through it, just going through life, just in a dark, down, desperate place. And my mom thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to every single day for 1 week, I am going to do a deliberate, intentional, thoughtful act of encouragement, of building up for this person. This is just a practical way to do this. So you could do it longer, you could do it shorter, whatever. But it's just like, because this happens to you, right? You and I do this all the time. You're just going through your week and some name pops to mind and you're like, man, I've been feeling for them. Well, I sure hope I'll pray for them, but maybe I'll send them a text saying anything I can do. But here's a really practical thing you can do, is you can think about them, pray about them, and then you can say, I'm going to do really deliberate, thoughtful acts of shalom for that person, for that friend, for that neighbor, for that coworker, for a tangible act of kindness for 7 days. I know, exhausting, right? That's like a marathon. 7 days of being nice. We could never. Who has the time? Find someone that it's challenging for you to love. And here's the good news. There's lots of them. Find someone that it's challenging for you to love. And it could be somebody real. It could be somebody that you work with. It could be somebody that you live with. Find someone that's challenging to love. and understand that God has provided an opportunity for you to be near them to bring shalom into that relationship. That's God. That's God's work. I want to point out one last thing from Luke, and then we're going to wrap up. We're actually going to sing a song in closing called In Christ Alone, but I'll call the praise team up here in a second. But Luke chapter 6, verse 37, this is what he says, and I love this, the way he twists this. He says, do not judge. All right, well, I guess if I need to be nice to people in the world. But then he says, and you will not be judged. And the funny thing is some of you are like, well, I'm not very judgmental, but sometimes I get judged anyway. The less judgmental you are, the less you'll notice it, if nothing else. The less you'll assume that somebody's being judgmental, if nothing else. But he says, do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. And I actually think he's talking about our relationship with him, by the way. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. And here's what he's saying. He's saying the kind of world that you want to occupy, that you want to live in, is on the other side of shalom. Of not them being nice to you, but you being loving to them. That's the kind of world that you want to live in. Shalom is on the other side of love. I'm going to ask the praise team to go ahead and come up on stage, and we're going to close with our song together. But I just want to encourage us. I don't know the practicalities of your specific situation. I don't know what kind of office environment God has put you in, what kind of coworkers, family members he's given you, but I guarantee you he has given you this expectation to love people. Would you stand as we sing In Christ Alone?